how do you feed a city of millions? Today, it's a non-stop ballet of trucks, cargo trains, and airplanes, supplying supermarkets 24/7. Now imagine doing it in a world with no engines, no refrigeration, and no instant communication. Imagine you have only wood, wind, and muscle. This was the challenge faced by ancient Rome. By the 1st century AD, it became the first city in human history to swell to a population of 1 million people, a sprawling marble metropolis that was the undisputed center of the world. But this megacity had a fatal flaw. It was completely incapable of feeding itself. The surrounding Italian countryside couldn't possibly sustain it. The city was a ticking time bomb, permanently just a few weeks away from mass starvation and violent riots. The solution was one of the most ambitious, complex, and vital logistical operations in all of history, an operation known as the Cura Annonae. With the name of Annona, divine guardian of grain, the Romans built a system that sustained their capital through centuries. So where did the food for 1 million people come from? The answer is from across the sea. While Egypt was the crown jewel of the grain supply, other provinces were essential. Sicily and critically, North Africa also sent vital shipments, ensuring Rome's granaries stayed full year after year. But it was the conquest of Egypt in 30 BC that truly secured Rome's food source. The province became the personal property of the Roman emperor, its sole purpose to act as the empire's primary breadbasket. Every year, after the Nile's predictable flood, Egyptian farmers would produce a massive surplus of grain, which was taken as a tax. The Greek geographer Strabo, writing shortly after the Roman conquest, described its incredible productivity.
It is clear that this country is today the most well-equipped to supply the necessities of life. Such is the care with which the Romans govern it. They have increased its revenues so greatly. The grain that is shipped from Alexandria to Rome is such a quantity that it is sufficient to feed the population of Rome for a whole year.
Strabo might have been exaggerating, but the amount was staggering. An enormous river of grain, flowing from the Nile to the Tiber. But first, it had to survive the journey. Transporting this colossal amount of grain required a specialized fleet of ships. These were the supertankers of the ancient world. Broad, deep-hulled sailing ships called naves honorariae. Some colossal ships could approach 180 feet long, with the very largest capable of carrying up to 1,000 tons of grain in rare cases. The journey was perilous. For much of the year, the Romans considered the Mediterranean too dangerous for large-scale shipping, a period they informally called the Closed Sea. This meant the entire year's supply had to be moved in just a few months. Every year, some ships never made it. Storms, pirates, or simple bad luck could doom thousands of tons of grain to the deep threatening Rome's fragile balance. This is why the arrival of the Alexandrian grain fleet was the most important event of the year. The Roman philosopher Seneca the Younger wrote a vivid, personal account of the moment the lead ships were spotted.
Suddenly there came into our view the ships from Alexandria. I mean the ones that are sent ahead to announce the coming of the main fleet. The whole crowd stood on the docks and could pick out the Alexandrian ships by their sails. In that moment of excitement, everyone rushes to the waterfront and with great joy recognizes the ships of Alexandria. They are the only ones permitted to keep their topsails up.
Seneca's excitement was shared across the city. Those ships carried grain, and with it a sense of relief and the quiet assurance that the city would endure. With them came the promise that ovens would stay hot and hunger would be held at bay. But the hardest part of their journey still lay ahead. The massive grain ships were too big to sail directly up the shallow, silty mouth of the Tiber River to Rome. So, around 46 AD, the Emperor Claudius began one of the greatest engineering projects of the era, a massive, artificial deepwater harbor on the coast called Portus. His successor, Trajan, expanded it further, adding a perfect hexagonal inner basin that is still visible from the air today. At Portus, the grain was unloaded and moved into massive warehouses called horea. These warehouses were engineering marvels in themselves, built with raised floors to fight moisture and rot, thick walls to deter thieves, and enough capacity to stockpile grain for lean years. From the horea, the grain was transferred onto smaller, shallow draft river barges, which were then pulled up the Tiber River by teams of men, often slaves, trudging along dedicated towpaths on the riverbank. Once in the capital, the grain was stored in city warehouses, ready for the final step: distribution. This is where the Cura Annonae really kicked in. For centuries, the state ensured that the urban population had access to grain. By the time of Augustus, up to 200,000 registered male citizens who held a special token, a tessera, were entitled to claim a heavily subsidized monthly ration of about 33 kilograms or 73 pounds of grain. But this 33-kilogram ration wasn't a convenient bag of ready-to-use flour. It was raw, unmilled grain kernels. For the hundreds of thousands of Romans receiving this dole, most of whom lived in crowded, multi-story apartment blocks called insulae, this presented a second challenge. Their small, often windowless apartments had no kitchens, and using an open fire or an oven was incredibly dangerous. A single stray spark could burn down an entire city block. Baking at home was simply not an option for the vast majority. So, the journey of the grain had one final, local step. The citizen would take their sack of kernels to a neighborhood miller and baker, known as a pistor. These bustling shops were vital hubs of Roman life. For a small fee, often paid by letting the miller keep a scoop of the resulting flour, the heavy grindstones, powered by donkeys or mules, would transform the grain into flour. For another small charge, the pistor would then use his large, safe, wood-fired ovens to bake that flour into the dense, round sourdough loaves that were the staple of the Roman diet. Of course, not all of it became bread. Some of the grain might be coarsely ground at home with a small hand mill or mortarium and boiled with water to create pulse, a simple but hearty porridge that had been the true food of Romans for centuries. This was an easy and efficient way to turn the state's gift into a warm, life-sustaining meal. Through this neighborhood economy of millers and bakers, the state's massive logistical operation finally ended up on the Roman family's table. Though it served the hungry, it also served the interests of the powerful. The Roman poet Juvenal famously sneered that the Roman people, once conquerors of the world, cared only for two things.
The people have long since cast off their cares. For the people who once upon a time handed out military command, high civil office, legions, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for just two things: panem et circenses, bread and circuses.
He was right. By providing subsidized bread and spectacular entertainment, the emperors kept the massive, potentially rebellious population of Rome placated. The grain dole was the foundation of imperial power. From the fertile fields of Africa, across the treacherous Mediterranean, through a man-made superport, and up the river to the bakeries of the capital, the journey of grain was the lifeblood of Rome. It was an incredible feat of logistics and engineering that allowed an empire to thrive, and whose eventual severing would signal its end. Special thanks to my Patreon members. Your support makes all of this possible. If you enjoyed this trip back in time and want to help me keep these videos coming, please be sure to hit like and subscribe for more fast history, and of course, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Thanks for watching.